Are we ready?
Gotta get up, move your body and press play. Gotta get up, run, hurry, and hit his tape. Gotta get up, a new story is headed your way. Gotta this is up. Conversations with Jay.
I want to talk about it's. You talked about kind of different instances in your life that you think back to, and then different, almost like triggering moments as you experience things as you grow. And in my mind, like a quarter life crisis, or a part of what a quarter life crisis is almost grieving maybe past selves or like past experiences that you maybe once had but don't have anymore.
Yeah.
In your instance, you had to grieve the loss of an experience that you missed out on, and that was a proper graduation. That was a proper send off of the hard work that you put into going to school, as
Absolutely.
well as like an industry that you were supposed to go into and the opportunities that were open to you and you had lined up,
Yeah.
but didn't fall through
Yeah.
because of this said pandemic, which of course everyone went through and was awful for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think again, outside of that, there's still a grieving process of almost like life that you experience
Yeah.
and having to transition out of it. It's a lot.
Absolutely.
And you turn that into a beautiful EP to talk about each of these experiences. And I think that's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember like I was still in class at this point. All classes were on Zoom, and I remember one of my professors. His name is Phil. Shout out to Phil. Shout out to Phil. His name is Phil, and I remember telling him, you know, I am going like this is a very difficult time for me right now, but I I feel like I can't feel that feel too bad about it because there are people in the world actually dying, actually losing people to COVID, actually going through um a real grieving process of another person. And he told me, I remember he told me that do not cut your grief short, or do not like compare your grief to another person's, because just because you're not losing a person per se, it doesn't mean that you haven't lost something. And to allow yourself to uh, feel the entirety of it and not say, well, it's not that bad because you didn't lose a person. And because you did lose, you lost what years of work, years that have gone into of performing and creating and trying to figure out what it is, how I'm going to be an artist as an actor in a flash, in like a few split second decisions. It's all gone. Yes, you're right, my proper send off of the graduation, but also like I was working on my final show at my final performances there, and we were working really hard and had a really beautiful script written by some of USC's MFA writers, and who really worked tirelessly on their work. And um it was a full loss of something, and that you should be able to sit in what you are feeling despite how bad something else may be. So yeah, it's a full process. It was a grief of like I'm losing something, but and then also going through the crisis itself, I learned a whole bunch about myself, and I feel like I am different in a way, and my old self has died a little bit, like a little piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to shout out to Phil too because I'm glad that he
Shout out to Phil.
I'm glad that he was able to share this with you. And
Yeah.
I think it's something that a lot, like at least myself, I'll say, I didn't use the word grief other than when I've lost someone in a physical sense of like the word. Like
Yeah.
I've lost someone, but I've learned as I've gotten older through my own crises that grief is an experience of loss, and you can lose anything. That
Yes.
includes a person, but that's an experience, an opportunity, a sense of life, stability, like all of these things. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you were able to move past that and understand that this wasn't an extreme and enormous loss for yourself, but
Yeah.
you moved past that in a way of kind of honing in on these experiences and writing about it. And I'm curious maybe what songs followed, let's say that first one, and maybe what was your writing process like when you were like, okay, Quarter Life Crisis Part 1, what's after?
After that, I would say I got into a tiff with my sister, and I wrote delivery I wrote Delivery Aside. My sister and I are very close, but
Delivery Aside's a ballad.
it's not. It maybe it starts that way, but it's not a ballad. And I got into my sister and I are very close, but we have been through our ups and downs, and we have talked a lot about communication. And I wrote Delivery Aside during a very difficult point in our relationship. Um, and there was actually a point where I didn't know if we would be able to keep the tightness of our sisterly bond, just because of ebbs and flows, just different things that just didn't sit right with me or my spirit. And so I wrote Delivery Aside, which is, I believe, in Delivery Aside in some ways. Like, Delivery Aside is about, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's the phrase that people use. But delivery aside, now I believe your delivery matters. Okay, I do. I believe your delivery matters. You shouldn't be yelling and screaming at people when you are trying to communicate something, thoughts, feelings. It's not necessary. However, when people get to that point where they are really passionate or really, I don't want to say aggressive, but like really mean what they say, and it maybe the delivery is not best, that just because their delivery is not the best that it could be does not mean that there is not truth in what they're saying to you. And that's why I wrote Delivery Aside, because because I meant it, like, because I mean, I'm not the person that's a yeller and screamer, but that doesn't mean there's not truth in what somebody's trying to communicate to you. And so that's why I wrote that.
Thank you for listening to our latest episode. Please be sure to check out jaysconversations.com for more discussion questions, the reading materials, and of course to learn more about our phenomenal guest. And also, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter and give us a follow on Instagram at Jay's Conversations. I'll see you next time.
Conversations with Jay.